What if everything you thought was required to be accepted by God wasn't actually required at all? What if a single decision could change the direction of faith for millions of people across generations? And what if grace is bigger than the rules we try to hold on to? The early church was growing fast. What began as a small group of believers had started to spread across cities, cultures, and backgrounds. Jews and Gentiles, people who had once been completely separate, were now coming together under one message: faith in Jesus. It was powerful, but it wasn't simple, because not everyone agreed on what that faith should look like. In Antioch, a question began to rise, a serious one, a defining one. Some men came down from Judea and began teaching the believers something that sounded convincing, even logical. Unless you are circumcised according to the custom taught by Moses, you cannot be saved. That statement hit hard, because it added something that had always been part of Jewish identity, something deeply rooted in tradition, something that for generations had symbolized belonging to God's people. And now it was being presented as a requirement for salvation. Not just faith, not just belief in Jesus, but faith plus something else. Paul and Barnabas didn't stay silent. They strongly disagreed. This wasn't a small difference in opinion. It was a core issue. It went to the heart of what the message of Jesus truly meant. Was salvation a gift of grace, or was it something that had to be completed with human effort? The disagreement became intense. So much so that it was decided Paul and Barnabas, along with some others, should go up to Jerusalem to see the apostles and elders about this question. This wasn't just a local debate anymore. It needed clarity, unity, truth. As they traveled, they passed through Phoenicia and Samaria, sharing how the Gentiles had come to faith. And everywhere they went, the news brought great joy to all the believers, because something incredible was happening. People who had once been outsiders were now part of the family. When they arrived in Jerusalem, they were welcomed by the church, the apostles, and the elders. They reported everything God had done through them. But then, the tension surfaced again. Some believers who belonged to the party of the Pharisees stood up and said, the Gentiles must be circumcised and required to keep the law of Moses. There it was again, the same issue, the same pressure, the same question. What does it really mean to be saved? The apostles and elders gathered to consider this matter. This wasn't rushed, it wasn't ignored, it was discussed deeply, because the answer would shape the future of the church. After much debate, Peter stood up. His voice carried authority, not just because of who he was, but because of what he had experienced. He reminded them of something important. God had already shown his acceptance of the Gentiles. He spoke about how God had chosen him earlier to share the message with them. And when they believed, God gave them the Holy Spirit, just as he had given it to the Jews. No difference, no separation. God did not discriminate. He purified their hearts by faith. That word matters. Faith, not rituals, not traditions, not added requirements. Faith. Peter then asked a powerful question. Why do you try to test God by putting on the necks of Gentiles a yoke that neither we nor our ancestors have been able to bear? That was honest, direct. Even the law, something deeply respected, had been something people struggled to fully carry, and now they were trying to place that same burden on new believers. Peter made it clear. We believe it is through the grace of our Lord Jesus that we are saved just as they are, not the other way around. Not they must become like us, but we are saved the same way they are. Grace. The room grew quiet. Then Paul and Barnabas spoke. They shared the signs and wonders God had done among the Gentiles through them, real stories, real evidence, real transformation. God was already working, without the added requirements, without the law being imposed. And then James spoke, a respected leader in the Jerusalem church. He brought wisdom, balance, and clarity. He connected what was happening to the words of the prophets, how God had always intended to include the Gentiles, to rebuild and restore, to bring people from all nations into his name. This wasn't a new idea, it was a fulfilled promise. And then, the decision. Clear, firm, grace-filled. It is my judgment, James said, that we should not make it difficult for the Gentiles who are turning to God. That line changed everything. Not make it difficult, not add barriers, not create obstacles. Instead, they wrote a letter, a message to the Gentile believers. They didn't ignore all guidance. They encouraged them to avoid certain practices that were closely tied to idolatry and moral confusion. Not as a requirement for salvation, but as a way to live in a way that honored God and maintained unity. It was about wisdom, not control. The letter was sent with trusted leaders, Judas and Silas, along with Paul and Barnabas. When the believers in Antioch received it, they were glad, encouraged, relieved, because the message was clear. Salvation is not about adding more. It's about receiving what has already been given, grace. This moment, the council at Jerusalem, was more than just a meeting. It was a turning point, a defining line. It protected the heart of the gospel. Because without that clarity, everything could have shifted. Faith could have become a system of rules. Grace could have been buried under expectations. Freedom could have been replaced with pressure. But instead, the truth stood firm. We are saved by grace, through faith. And maybe today that message is more relevant than ever. Because even now, people struggle with the same question. Am I enough? Have I done enough? Do I need to prove myself? Do I need to fix everything before I come to God? And the answer is the same. No, you don't earn grace, you receive it. That doesn't mean your life doesn't change, it does. But the change comes from the inside out, not from pressure, but from transformation. Not from fear, but from love. The early church had to fight for that truth, to protect it, to define it clearly. And because they did, we still have that message today. Uncomplicated, powerful, free. But that doesn't mean it's always easy to accept. Because grace challenges something deep within us. It challenges the part that wants control, the part that wants to earn, the part that wants to feel worthy on its own terms. But grace says you don't have to. You are invited, as you are. And that invitation changes everything. The council at Jerusalem reminds us that faith is not about building walls, it's about opening doors. It's not about creating barriers, it's about removing them. It's not about making people carry more, it's about helping them find freedom. And maybe right now you need to hear that. Maybe you've been carrying something heavy, trying to be enough, trying to fix everything, trying to earn something that was never meant to be earned. And maybe it's time to let that go. To receive grace, to trust that what Jesus has done is enough. Because it is, it always has been, and it always will be. The story doesn't end with a debate. It ends with encouragement, with unity, with a message that brings life. Judas and Silas stayed for a time, strengthening the believers with many words of encouragement. Because once the truth is clear, it builds people up. It gives them confidence. It gives them peace. It gives them direction. And that's what this message still does today. It strengthens, it encourages. It reminds us that we don't walk this path alone, and we don't walk it under pressure. We walk it in grace. So wherever you are right now, whatever you've been carrying, whatever questions you've been asking, know this. You don't have to earn your way in. You are already invited. The door is open. The message is clear. Grace is enough. Thank you for watching this video. If this message spoke to your heart, don't forget to like, follow the channel Holy Path Insights, and share this video with someone who needs to hear this truth today. Your support helps spread faith, freedom, and hope to people around the world.